5 grams of creatine has been the gym bro staple since I started lifting, and rightly so. Now it's picked up interest exponentially online according to this Google Trends and doesn't show any signs of slowing. It's the #2 most researched supplement in history next to whey protein. It's safe, it's found in foods in abundance, and is incredibly effective. But you could be taking it wrong, and you might not be taking it for the right reasons. There are a few things I'm going to cover today that might wake you up to the fact that you could be totally wasting your time with creatine, and you could be getting tremendous benefits that you don't even know. There's some new research that have come out that has been incredible. Now, I'm not saying in any way that you shouldn't take it. In fact, I think it should be a mandatory. But if you don't take it right, it could be a waste of your time. Now, 5 grams of creatine seems to be a thing of the past. The new fad? Well, people are saying 10, 20, or 30 grams per day. One study I'm going to share with you even says 50 grams for someone my size. And news headlines have picked these up, and to me, they're getting out of hand. Here's just a couple that I came across. The BBC said creatine helps with brain fog. Nature said that a single dose of creatine improves cognitive performance. And GQ claims that creatine can counteract sleep loss. Now, the muscle building assistant has apparently shifted to be the potential miracle supplement. Now, this isn't just the news, of course. They're off the back of researchers who are jumping on board. Now, yeah, researchers are studying creatine for everything from concussion recovery to cognitive performance to effects on sleep deprivation. And they're trying to expand the uses past just muscular strength and power, which is, again, extremely well studied. And we'll talk about macrodosing for that in a moment. But here's the question. Is creatine actually the most underrated supplement in the world? Or is it just the internet taking a good thing and the news taking a great thing, spinning some new research and running with it way too far? Today, I'll break down the latest science for you, separating the hype from reality and telling you exactly who should be taking creatine, how much creatine you should be taking, the pitfalls of maybe not taking as much as you think you are, and how it could go way beyond just building muscle and strength. Let's get into it. Now, you guys know my background is in science. I'm a master's degree in clinical exercise physiology, and diving into studies is one of my favorite things. So before we all start dumping 20 grams of creatine into our morning smoothie and calling it a super supplement for our brain and our body, let's take a pause. Because just as exciting as this boom is, and trust me, I'm right there with you, it is worth taking a step back. For me, if it can improve mental health, it can reduce signs of dementia, can reduce brain aging, to me, that's better than any physical outcome you can get for your body. So yes, creatine is having some huge buzz, and yes, we are seeing it researched beyond just muscle and strength. We see research around cognitive performance, around neurological health, even around depression, anxiety, and aging, which is all incredibly promising. But just because something has potential, it doesn't mean it's magic. CBD was the magic of 5 years ago, and before that, it was something else, and before that, it was something else. Generally, these really good compounds become popularized for a reason, it blows up, and then it contracts what it actually should be. So a lot of what we're seeing right now is early research, small sample sizes, some animal models, and some hypothesized mechanisms that are biologically plausible, but not fully understood. And we've seen this before. One study comes out suggesting creatine might help with brain fog or mood. Then that gets spun and implicated way beyond that, and suddenly it's being marketed as a cure for anxiety and depression. That's not exactly how this works. Let's take this back to the strength world for a moment. If creatine could be used as a brain fuel, which is what it's hypothesized to be doing, well, that's going to be incredibly neuroprotective. We're then going to have 3 layers of nutrients for our brain to work off, because fat is just far too slow when we're exercising. We could use carbohydrate, we could use ketones, or we could use creatine. And if we have those 3 sources, having that neuroprotectant on 3 levels means that you're going to be able to do more focus for longer and have a more intense workout day after day. Your recovery will improve, and ultimately, you're going to get bigger and stronger because of that. So we have the benefits expanding dramatically, and then we start talking about macrodosing. Traditional advice is 5 grams per day, and no loading, no need to cycle off, but now people are proposing 10, 15, even 20 grams per day for weeks or months on end. Now, it's not necessarily dangerous. Creatine has one of the best safety profiles of any supplements ever studied. In fact, all that happens once creatine gets into your bloodstream, if we can't do anything with it, it converts to creatinine in your blood and you urinate it out. That's why you don't want to take creatine before blood work, because your creatinine levels are high and your kidneys appear to be injured. It's just really expensive pee at that stage. But again, what are we trying to achieve here? Are we looking to saturate brain creatine levels? Do we maybe need more creatine in our muscles than we think? Are we targeting clinical populations? Are we just chasing performance without really understanding the ceiling? Taking a more is better approach. And the point is, not all creatine hype is bad, but it needs context. And the context is important because that's what you're going to use to improve your training in your life. And before we treat it like the next fish oil or vitamin D that everyone should be taking, we need to look at what the research actually says, what's still theory, and who this stuff is really for. So next, let's break it down. And really, the researchers aren't trying to say it does things that it doesn't. It's the news that takes it one step further. I'll walk you through what we know about creatine's effects outside of muscle and strength, and whether macrodosing has any real merit for the average lifter, athlete, or even everyday person. So let's go back to those news articles and pick apart the studies that they were talking about. The first article here is by Nature, and Nature is a well-established publication, and it says single-dose creatine improves cognitive performance during sleep deprivation. This is one of the most popular studies around creatine that I have ever seen, published in February 2024, and it has been accessed 631,000 times. Research articles aren't like having a viral reel. This is truly a massive number that you do not see very often at all. Clearly, people are interested. But what's funny to me is this study was only 15 healthy subjects between 20 and 28. They were restricted of having caffeine and alcohol for 48 hours per study. They were given a massive dose of creatine equivalent to 31 grams for a 200-pound man, or 52 grams for someone my size. And the participants were kept up all night completing cognitive tasks, memory tasks, and it showed improved cognitive function by 20% when taking a large dose of creatine compared to someone who took a placebo. This was most evidence 4 hours after administration. So the obvious takeaway is that cognition goes up 20% when you take huge doses of creatine. At least that's what the news says. All we see is 15 university kids improved 20% when they were kept up all night, but if they slept, it would have been way better anyway. And this doesn't apply to someone just having a bad sleep, it applies to someone not sleeping at all. It also doesn't apply if you've taken caffeine or drank alcohol. In these cases, we have to be very careful. Yes, it showed improved cognition with creatine, but there are two things we have to consider. One, it's a sample size that is very small. You imagine this is just a lab at a university, and I've been in many of these studies. You just go into a room and it's usually your professor, you're usually volunteering for them, and it's their teaching assistants running it, or the teaching assistants are volunteering, and you're having some fun and doing a thing and just finding out what you find out, which is all well and good. But you cannot take a sample size that small, apply it across every single person, control every condition to maximal extent, see a significant, but not significant compared to the second point I'm going to talk about, improvements, and then start having that go absolutely ballistic. And then that's where we get into issues where it says researchers say, professors say creatine improves cognition by 20%. It's true, especially during sleep deprivation, but it's not totally true. They're saying under these specific conditions, we saw this very small group of people go through a positive change. And a lot of these studies, the goal is just to see, should we study this further? Not necessarily we're making a definitive statement. And when you do make a definitive statement is when you have all of these studies under a variety of conditions, then you do a systematic review and meta-analysis and say, yes, we can actually say for certain this is a result that we're seeing reliably. The second bit we have to consider is we're not saying creatine or you can't do anything. It's creatine versus the alternatives. And we have this one study that talks about taking caffeine when you're in a fatigue state. Now, in this study, they have caffeine producing more profound results on cognition during sleep deprivation than we found with creatine. What's interesting to me then is what happens if we stack them together? But alone, if you had the choice between creatine or caffeine during a late night study session or work session, you're better off taking the caffeine. Here's another study. The effects of creatine supplementation on cognitive function in adults, a systematic review and meta-analysis. Now we can trust this because it's a much larger sample size. They're taking a collection of data, filtering out what's useful and what's not, and they looked at a few things. They looked at memory, attention time, and processing speed, all of which improved when taking higher doses of creatine. They did not see improved cognitive function or improved higher level thinking. It didn't make anyone smarter. And they saw no difference whether the creatine was continued short-term or long-term. Now, since they didn't see a difference short-term or long-term, it does show that if you feel like you're going to have a time where you need to be particularly attentive, well, higher doses of creatine could be useful. If you need to solve a complicated problem, well, it shows that creatine doesn't help you with that. There's no extra neural connections happening from that creatine. Now, let's take a step back and talk about what creatine actually is. It's a molecule that holds a phosphate ester, which can be cracked off, and that phosphate turns ADP into ATP for energy. We have about 1 second of ATP stores in our body and 5 seconds of creatine stores, and we have about 4 to 5 grams of creatine per kilo of muscle tissue, which is around 140 grams for the average man. If we take supplementation at 5 grams per day, we increase our body's creatine by 10 to 20%, which works out to an increase of 20 grams or so for the average man. Logically, this takes creatine energy from 5 seconds to 7 seconds with that 10% increase in stores. It doesn't sound like a big deal, but as compounded over time, it is massive. And if we can have that compounding in our brain with the number of connections that we're making, if we can improve efficiency, it would be incredibly, incredibly strong. But anyone who needs to show this to their mom, please do. Saying creatine is dangerous is about as common sense as saying a piece of bread is dangerous. They're both just simple energy sources. They don't have any impact on any other system in your body, no hormonal impact. They don't change your blood work in any way that's really meaningful or concerning. There's no upper limit that's been shown to be dangerous. And in fact, eating too many carbohydrates is probably more dangerous for you than eating too much creatine. It's just a matter of the expense of your urine. But all it is a molecule that holds phosphate to give a phosphate to ADP to give yourself energy. It really is as simple as that. Now let's take a look at one more study. This is talking about the dose of creatine and potential maximal dosing or macro dosing. And it shows a slight increase in strength as creatine dosage goes up. But we're going to get back to that later. So what is this new research saying? Well, the new research is saying that huge doses of creatine and brain benefits can be useful. It can have a positive effect on your brain, and how can this be? Well, creatine can get into the brain through the blood-brain barrier via creatine transporters, and the amount is very small compared to what's in our bloodstream, but supplementation will increase your stores, and this has been shown. Then the logic continues. More creatine in the brain means more brain energy, just like we have more muscle energy causing more muscle power. Maybe we have more brain power, and more brain power over time means less cognitive decline and better cognitive performance. This is also repeatable in studies with ketone supplementation, which has been established in research with regard to brain health for a much longer period of time than creatine. You guys know I use Ketone IQ, and it's exactly for this reason. I find a dramatic difference in protecting my brain and having me focus after workout as during. Just to go down this rabbit hole a little bit, because we have to establish, if we're talking about creatine for the brain, is it the best thing to be doing? And I'll skip to the answer because you guys know that I work with Ketone IQ. I think they can all be used together, and there's no one definitive this is best. But let's talk about ketones and how they have a positive effect on the brain. We've got glucose, which is a chosen primary fuel source for the brain. Ketones, a secondary primary chosen fuel source for the brain. And then we have creatine, which is now this emerging fuel source for the brain. Not that we didn't know it was there before, but I don't think we knew the extent to which it could benefit us if we supplement it at higher doses. And if we have 3 layers of protection and 3 layers of energy, it makes sense that we're going to be able to protect our nervous system better. We also see that ketones reduce blood sugar. Managing blood sugar is a great thing for long-term brain health, but also performance. If we can have lower blood sugar, we can then consume more carbohydrates. Consuming more carbohydrates mean more readily available energy for our muscles, while our brain uses ketones as fuel. This is why I love Ketone IQ. This is why I use it every single workout. These types of things, and the more I look into it, the more bought in I am that this is something that people should be doing. And we've got protein and creatine as my non-negotiables, and ketones is creeping its way up onto the list for exactly reasons like this. But go do your research for yourself, because brain, sympathetic nervous system, and ketones could tremendously help you. So ketones lower blood glucose, and the first thing we have to ask is why? Where's the glucose going? Well, presumably it has to be going to tissues that use it. It's a signal to your body that we have excess energy in the bloodstream, so we can soak in more carbs. I mean, that muscles have more energy, and like I said, we can then eat more food and more carbohydrates during our workouts to keep blood sugar up, which is gonna get sucked out of the bloodstream faster. Like this short-term insulin sensitivity spike, blood sugar gets controlled very, very well. We don't have a big spike and a crash from taking excess carbohydrates because we're buffered with ketones. I indicated that you might even be taking creatine wrong in the first place, and I mean it. This isn't something I learned until about 2 months ago. But did you know that creatine converts to creatinine, a one-way chemical process that makes creatine completely useless, and this conversion starts the second you start mixing it? That your water temperature affects the conversion rate, and you might be scooping perfect creatine monohydrate into your shaker cup, but drinking pure, useless creatinine by the time you actually get to drinking it. Like I said, this is spontaneous, it happens immediately, it's irreversible, and impossible to avoid. Lower pH levels accelerate this, so your stomach theoretically could speed up this process considerably, and high temperatures increase the conversion rate as well. Now, creatine works really well because, to be honest, it's unlikely you're creating the environment that it matters too much. But let's say at a hot protein drink, like Dr. Mike's protein hot chocolate, and it only takes minutes for creatine to completely convert to creatinine. Let's say you put creatine in a juice, like a delicious OJ and yogurt that you guys know I love so much. Half of the creatine will be gone in a matter of hours, converted to creatinine. If you made something like this in the evening and plan to drink it in the morning, well, all you're having is pure creatinine. You get zero benefit from creatine altogether. This is not to mention that creatine should not be taken by everyone. Almost everyone, but not totally everyone. Supplemental creatine will convert to creatinine in your blood, and it makes your blood work look like you have kidney dysfunction. So if you do have kidney dysfunction, it can put a small extra load, but more importantly, you're gonna have a hard time tracking, in some cases, how much your kidneys are stressed. Pregnant women are also discouraged from taking creatine, but this seems like it could be the biggest area of benefit. Logically, if creatine helps to prevent brain degradation, you would think then it could absolutely help fetal brain development. I would bet that creatine is a standard pregnancy supplement in the future, and I believe that's the number one thing that's going to come out of all of this new research, is that pregnant women are going to start being advised to take creatine. So is creatine a compound miracle? Absolutely not. It is a mandatory for anyone resistance training. And if you're looking after cognitive performance, and that's what you want, go to B vitamins, go to antioxidants like vitamin C and E, vitamin D and K, and fish oils, and then start thinking about your creatine. My only current problem with creatine dosing is that we don't talk about it in relation to the size of the person. So I believe instead of a 5 grams per day stock standard approach, we should be doing 0.05 grams per kilogram of body weight. So a 100 kilogram man, 5 grams per day. For myself at 150 kilos, I should be taking 7.5 kilos. No, I shouldn't. I should be taking 7.5 grams of creatine per day. Do the calculation for yourself, and that, I believe, is the best evidence-based recommendation at this stage. I don't think that taking creatine for brain health has near enough evidence or research or rationale behind using that as your primary approach. But if you eat well, you move well, you take your fish oils, you take your vitamin D, you get out in the sun often, and you want to take creatine at higher doses on the off chance that it does actually improve some levels of long-term brain health, I think it can absolutely be a good idea. But never forget your staples: sleep, nutrition, life stress. Get those sorted, sleep well, enjoy your life, keep your stress low, keep your cortisol down, take a few vitamins like vitamin D and antioxidants, and you should be good to go. As always, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already for new information like this every single day, and leave a comment with your thoughts on creatine and what you think the new research could indicate. Thank you guys very much for watching. Until tomorrow, lift heavy and be kind.